week number 9. So in the week number 9, we will be discussing about the classes and the objects. So which we will be divided into 2 lectures, week number 9 and week number 10. So for now, we will start recording the lecture number 9. And let me start sharing the screen for you. So here is the screen. And let me go to the PowerPoint presentation. Okay. So as we discussed in the class, so this is just a recap for all the things that we have discussed in the class. So classes and objects. So as you know that classes are the most important language features that make object-oriented programming possible. So classes are very highly important because this is where your object-oriented programming possibility thing starts from. So programming in Java consists of defining a number of classes. So we are required to define a number of classes. And as you know that every program in a class in Java, every program is a class actually in Java. And all other helping software consist of classes. And all programmer defined types are also called as classes. So when you talk about all helping software consists of classes, you can see that we have already used some of the predefined classes like math class and then string, scanner. So those are all helping software classes. And then further we will be doing something which are called as programmer defined class, which we will create for based on the objects that we will use. So we will create classes on that. So classes are central to Java, which is very crucial. If you want the Java program to run, you will be having minimum 1 class. And you already know how to use classes and objects created from them and how to invoke their methods. So earlier weeks, we have seen how we can use the classes like string, math, and scanner, and how we were creating the objects. So scanner input is equal to new of scanner of class that we were doing that things. Now you will learn how to define your own class and their methods and how to create your own objects from them. So this is the third part that we said that all programmer defined types are also classes. So we will be doing defining our own classes and methods. So as a class is a type, is a special kind of programmer defined type, and variables can be declared of a class type. So you will be declaring a class, and in that you will be having the variables, and you can declare according to the type of class that you are building up. So a value of a class type is called as an object or an instance of the class. A value of a type of a class is an object. You call it as an object, or you can call it as an instance of the class as well. So for example, if a class A is a class, then generally we say that any other type or any other class, so blah is of type A, or blah is an object of the class A, and blah is an instance of a class A. So it means that they all are similar to what we are talking about. A class determines the type of data that an object can contain as well as the actions it can perform. So it contains the type and what it is performing, the actions that it will perform. So we need to create a class based on the type and based on the actions or the behaviors that it will perform. So earlier we know that primitive type, where primitive type versus class type values. So for example, a primitive type value is a single piece of data that can be all objects of the class have the same methods, and all objects of the class have same piece of data. That is, you will be having the name, type, and number, which is all primitive. But whereas a class type value or an object can have multiple pieces of data. So in an class, you will be having multiple pieces of data, as well as the actions, which are called as methods. So for example, for a given object, each piece of data can hold a different value. So in a class, if you talk about different objects, they can store different values. So which we will be looking at when we talk in more about it. So the overall definition, to make the things clear, a class definition is a type of definition specifies the data items and methods that all of its objects will have. These data items and methods are sometimes they are also called as members of the object. So the data types that we will use, they will be called as members. And data items are also called as fields or instant variables. instance variables. So instance variables, declarations, and methods definitions can be placed in any order within the class definition. So you can put the variables in any order in a class. So as we already know that programmers can create their own classes, and classes are essentially a template or a blueprint. So this is generally we call it as a class as a template, or we can say is a blueprint for all instance of the class. So the class code also communicates to the compiler how to define, create, and interact with the objects of the particular different type of classes. So now let's look at the class. You can only create objects if you have a class. Remember that. Without a class, you cannot create objects. So you should have a class, and then from that class, you can create objects. So generally, a class consists of three parts: a head, the attribute, and the method. So head means it is the name of the class, which contains the name of the class. So you can see here that we are having here a name of the class, and then we have an attributes. So the attributes that we will define, and the methods that we will define to do something. So that can do something, and the information about the objects that you want to store are attributes. So this is where the representation of a class in generally in a UML specification, UML diagrams, you can represent it as the name of the class, attributes, and methods. Next, so let's look at the first example about the students class. So now we use the class to create objects. So we will create objects based on the class, which you can use to store the students' data. So say, for example, I want to create a student class and I want to store information about the students for 10 students, 20 students, as many students that you are wanting to create them as objects, and then you can save this data. So for that, you need to have a blueprint and define it and declare it as a class with the members and with the methods that you will use in the class. So for now, each student should have the following: an ID number, a name, a year of study, and a department. So now we will declare this as a data type. So you can see here that we are having a class called as public class student. And in that student, we are having the different ID number, which is integer. We have a student name as a string and integer as a student year, and the department also as a string. So you can see that we are making a blueprint for the class named as student, which is a public, which can be accessible by other classes. And then we are having integer and all those variables that you want to define for an object. So you make it as a class variables, and then we close the class. So the word public is an access specifier. So that what you can say here, that indicates that this class is for general use and can be accessed from any other class. As I mentioned, if you write here public, it can be accessible by all the other classes that we will be defining in our next slides. Okay, so now we have defined a class. Now we want to make up an object. So an object can have any abstract concept. So it can have, and a person can be an object. Then we can talk it as a date of birth, an address, and an account number. So all these things goes as an object. So how do you create objects now? If you type a class and it was compiled, you can make objects. So now previously we wrote a class, and now it compiled well, and now later on then we can make objects. So you can create new objects with the word new. So we will be using the word here new. So new as a student. So whenever you want to say an object for a student class has to be created, so we will be writing the word new and creates an object of the class. So see here, I want to create a number of students. So you will be having here student one as an object name, as an object, and here also as an object, which is equal to new of the student. So it will directly create new of the student and new of the. So whatever the members that you have defined in the class, so all those will be applicable to student one and student two objects. So use these names. You can keep the objects apart. So we can use them separately as many number of objects you have. So the name of an object is called as a reference to that object. So this one is called as a reference to the object. Say, for example, we are declaring student one and student two, and as we have previously declared a class where we are having a student ID, name, string, string name, string integer ID, and string department. So the two objects are empty. So you can, if you see here, we have two are integer values as zeros, and these are strings that are nulls. So when you get this, any string value will get null value and any integer will get 0 by default. So because we did not have any variables assigned to them, values assigned to them, so that's why they get the default values. So now student 1 also gets the same, student 2 also get the same. So we will be having as many number of students you create as an objects, then instance of an object that will have the same values. Now, as previously you saw, objects with nulls and zeros will not provide information, so they don't give any confirmation, any valuable information for us. So the attribute must be given meaningful values, and there are different ways to do that. So now I would like to give the values to this. So ID will be there, student will have a name, and student will also have an year. So I would like to give the values to that. But if you make a constructor and if you make the values by default, it will get the same based on the data type. So now how do you do that? You have to give a meaningful names. So a common way is you will be making methods, or you can do something what are called as constructors. So we will do both of them in our lecture now. So I can now create objects and store data in the attributes using the methods and using the constructors. You can use both. Constructors can be used and also methods can be used. It depends upon the type of program that you are working on. So, and nothing more than that. If you want, you can do something with these objects. Well, now you can do anything with those objects. So you can retrieve something, change something, delete something. So you can do it as you want according to your program that you are doing. So you have to make something which are called as methods. So now we will do the methods. So this is the previous one. How do you create an instance of a class? As I mentioned to you that once you created a class, you can create instance of an object. So what are instance? Inherit all the attributes and methods that you have defined in a class template. Everything will come to an object. So you can interact independently of one another. So you can change the values and modify whatever for every object values. And you are having some reference objects. So you are creating a reference are created using the new operator. So an object of a class is named or declared by any variable of class type. So here you can see here that we have a student class, and then we are giving a class variable for that. You can do it and then make it as a new. The new operator must be used to create the objects and associated with it. So class var is equal to new of class name, or you can directly do it in a single line where you are having class name class var is equal to new of class name. So generally, you can do it in declared separately, declare a variable of that class type, and then you can create an object associated with a new operator, or you can combine them into a new line. So generally, any one of those can be adopted. So instant variables can be defined in the following two examples. So now you see here that we are having public modifier. So public string, the instance variable, and public integer instance variable. So these are the instance variables where in a class you can define. In order to reference to a particular instance variable, preface it with the object name as follows. So earlier we create objects. So you want to use this particular variable. Yes, you can use it, but you have to use the object name. So here we were talking about student S1, S2. So those are the objects that you created. So if you want, you can use this one as S1 dot, the variable that you want using it. And here you have another variable. You can use it for S2, or you can even use depending upon the type of instance variable that you are using for. Now, the important part is about the constructors. Uh, and as you know, that constructor are also called as the methods that allow user to create instances. Constructor is a special method which in turn run at the time of creation of an object. So whenever an object is created, it will be created. The constructor is created. It is designed to initialize instance variable for an object. So good programming practice dictates that class should have a default constructor. So there is a default constructor also, which will get the values of the variables that you have defined in a class. So according to that, it will get the values. So constructor which contains parameters typically initialize the private variables of the class to values passed in by the user. So see here, you can see that you are having a public as a constructor. The class name will be same like the method name in a constructor. And if you are having any parameters, then you can have it when you are using it in the main program. When you create objects, you can call the constructor with the parameters that you have defined and the code followed it. And as I mentioned to you, that a constructor must have the same name as the class name. And a constructor has no type return, not even void. So no type return and not even void, you can have those things. So there is no return type and there is no void in the constructor. So see here, and the important thing is constructors are typically overloaded. So what do you mean by overloaded is that the method name will be same, but the signature will be different. So what do you mean by method name of a constructor will be same? Uh, let's look first for a class. So now I am declaring a class about constructor. And now you can see here that we are having some variables defined, and then the class name and the constructor name are same, and the constructor is a method. So now this is without any parameters. So there is no parameters here. So we will be calling it as an no parameter constructor. So a constructor can be written with more than once with a different set of parameters. Now this is without parameters. Now, for example, if you want to write the parameters, you can do that. So you can see here that I am having a class A. You see here, this is a public A, this is public A, this is a public A. So these are all three different constructors and overloaded. The first one doesn't have any parameters. And here you are having two parameters, which are of integer value. And then we are having in parameters with character and string value. So here it is common that you have all of them have the same constructor name. So it is overloading any parameters, and then you can. A constructor can be overloaded and it can be passed parameters to initialize the variable. So we can do that one as we want. So now later on, you can create instance of the classes and as an object and then call the methods individually. So which we will look into it. So how do you do it now? A constructor is called when a new object of the class is created with the new. So you can see here that class name, the object name that you want is equal to the new class name and any arguments that you are going to use. So the constructor that you have defined, maybe you are using a default value or you are using any arguments that you can use it over here. So the name of the constructor and its parameterized list of arguments must follow a new operator. So here you use new. This is only valid way to invoke a constructor. A constructor cannot be invoked like an ordinary method. So you have to use directly the constructor object reference to call for the method. If a constructor is invoked again using the new, the first object is discarded and an entirely new object is created. So whenever you are calling based on the different objects, you will be using a reference with a new, and then the values will be, previous values will be discarded, and then you are having a new entirely new object created. So if you need to change the values of instance variables of the objects, use the mutuator methods instead. So say, for example, if you want to change the values of instance variables of the object, once you have defined it and you want to change it, you have to use something which are called as mutators. So we will look into it now. So the default constructor, good practice is that class should have a default constructor. A default constructor has no arguments. This is just like a revision, what I told you now, and typically initializes all private variables to the base values. So you can see here that we have a constructor called as vehicle, and this is public. There is no parameters here. So there is make and mile per gallon, which is assigned to the null values. And here it is string, so it is null, and here it will be. So if you don't create it, it will automatically take the default values. Now we can see here that I am having the previous one is vehicle without parameters now, but here I am having with two parameters, string and integer. So now whatever the make that you are having in the class, you are making this one as equal to m, and miles per gallon, you are making it as mpg. So when you call in the main program, when you create instance variable, you can have the string value and then you are having an integer value. So this constructor will be called. Now see here, it is already given here. So to initiate a vehicle instance using the constructor with the parameters. So these are the parameters, use arguments. So we will be using the argument here. The name of the string value is Toyota, and here it is 30 miles per gallon. So now when I create an object with the vehicle class, so the constructor name and the class name are same here. So you have my reference, my car as a reference. So to initiate a vehicle instance using the default constructor. Now this is calling the constructor with two arguments here. two arguments, and the parameters, it will replace it and you are calling it. But for example, if you don't want to call like this one, you simply want to call the default. So in that case, you can create vehicle, my vehicle is the class name here, and my car is an object which is equal to new of vehicle. So there is no parameters here or no arguments to call the value. So it will be a default constructor will be called. So the firm action taken by a constructor is to create an object with instance variables, like what you saw previously. Therefore, it is legal to invoke another method with the definition of constructor, since it has newly created objects as it is calling objects. So whenever a constructor is called, it will change with the reference of that object. For example, you don't want to do it that way. So you are having mutator methods can be used to set values of the instance variables. So you will want to give the instance values variables, then you have mutator methods. It is even possible for one constructor to invoke another. So in a constructor, you can call another constructor. So let's see in our lectures coming ahead. If you do not include any constructor in your Java, Java will automatically create a default, no argument constructor, like what I mentioned, that has no arguments, performs no initialization, but allows the objects to be created. If you include even one constructor in your class, Java will not provide this as a default constructor. So you have to create a constructor and then you will override the default constructor. If you include any constructor in your class, be sure to provide your own argument constructor as well. So that's where you will write your constructors as such. So let's look at an example here to explain you the concept of object-oriented programming. Write a class that has 3 integer instance variables. The third integer is the sum of the first 2. So you are having 3 integers, which are instance variables, and the third integer is the sum. So now what we are supposed to do, we will create an object of class num such that the first integer is assigned the value 5 and the second integer is assigned the value 7. And then we want to calculate the third integer value. The first step is we will declare a class. So you can see here that it's a class is declared here. And we said that we need 2 variables, first 2 integers. So we are having integer and integer. And the third one is also the sum. So I am having an integer sum. So now you want to add those numbers. So I am adding a normal method, public void add, and sum is x1 plus x2. So this is the method that you are doing. Now go to the public class num test, public static void main string args. Now you are creating an instance of the class num and you are creating an object reference n1 is equal to new of num, and you are calling this one without any parameters, without any arguments. So what will be the things? It will go here. What are the default values? First integer n1 dot x. So you want to use this object n1 and this is the x1. And then second integer, the objects that you have created n1 and x2 here. And then you are calling sum is equal to with the object n1 plus 1. So the values, it will go here as 0, 0, and sum will be 0. So you can see here that we are getting the values as 0, 0, and 0 because there is no values are assigned to that. Now what I'm doing next time is I'm setting the reference values variables as with the object reference n1.x1 is equal to 5, n1.x2 is equal to 7, and then I am calling with the method n1.add. So now because you have set the value, first integer is n1.x1 is 5, n1.x2 is 7. So you can see here that fun and 7, and then you are calling n1.add. So n1.add, when you call, the method will go here and sum is equal to what was the values for x1 is 5 and x2 is 7. So the answer is 12. So this is one of the solutions. So we can do a better way to do that where you are not having the values as zeros and those things. So we have to go for a better way. So when you want to go for a better solution, now I will use a constructor, and that constructor will be a default constructor that I want to use where the values will be initialized to 0 again. So now you see here class num, we have x1, x2 and the same thing. But now you can see here that we are creating a constructor n1, number. So public number and x1 is equal to 5. I initialize it, x2 is equal to 7. And then I am having here, see that there is no parameters here. So it means that it is default. So now public void add is a method x1 plus x2. Now I go back to the public class, another one, num2 static main, and num as a reference to this class, and n1 as an object reference is equal to new of num. And now I say n1 dot add. So when it goes to n1 dot add, then the program will directly go over to here, n1 dot add. So n1 dot add, sum is equal to x1 plus x2. So what is the value of sum is equal to x1 plus x2? So it is 5 and 7. So we are calling that method n1 dot add over here. So n1 plus x1 first integer is 5, and x1 plus n1 plus x2 will be 7. So you get a 7 here, and you are calling with the sum n1 dot sum as the values. So when it goes here, so you are calling again sum is equal to x1 plus x2. So the values of x1 and x2 will be 5 plus 7. It is going to get you the 12. So this is one way to do that one, which is better. And now we have another one, which is the best solution is using a default constructor with some arguments, parameters defined inside it. So now in the previous solution, different objects of the class now will be created, same initial values as 5 and 7. A more general solution is to create objects with different values. So that's how the program works. So we can write a constructor with arguments. So now we were doing without arguments, but now we will do with the arguments and see how the program will work. Now the same n1, x1, x2 as a sum as a method, and now we are having a constructor. You see the difference from the previous one. The previous one did not have any parameters, but now here you are having the parameters that you will be using to get the value over here. So x1 is equal to x. So this x1 is equal to x and x2 is equal to y. Now add a method, same program with the method. The only thing is here you are having a constructor. Now go back to the main method. You are creating two references for the object n1 and n2, and here you are calling the constructor with two arguments because you have a constructor here. So the n1 dot add and n2 dot add. So directly the program will get the values here. So in the first case, n1 dot x1 will be 5. In the second case, it is going to be 7. And in the calling sum add, so here it will be x1 and x2 will be replaced by 5 and 7, and you get your 12 here. The similar way, then for the second one, we have 10 and 8 here. So n2 dot x1 is 10 and n2 dot x2 is 8. So this one is going to be 18 getting over here. So that is one of the solutions. And then that way you have the other way to do that one, which is the most best solution is, which is called as accessors and mutators. So this is the other way to do that one. If you remember, we said that we can do it with methods, and also one of the method is constructor, and the other way to do that one is using the accessor and mutators. So in accessor and mutators, we call it as set method and get methods. So the program is all the same, numbers, private. So, but here you are seeing that the values are private here. So it is better to declare the instance variables as private and accessing them using accessor and mutator. So we can use it only by the instance that are using this particular class. So therefore, they can be directly accessed in the main class. So if you are using public, it can be accessed. They're accessed directly in the main class. Sometimes it is better to install as a variable where you can do it using accessor method. So now all these are same. You have a constructor, you have a call and method, a void method for add. Now I am going to use the concept of accessor and mutators. So now, what are the variables that you have? X. So we will write a function get x and it will return. So the return type is integer and it is returning the value based on that. So similarly, we are getting the value x2 and we are having integer as a return type. So we get the return type as this one. And also we have a method called as sum, and we can get the sum value to be as return, and that's also an integer value. So now what will happen is when you go for the program, you can call here with the same 5 and 7. So when you call with 5 and 7, what will happen here? The value of x will be 5 and the value of y will be 7. So now you are calling these values. So those values will be passed on, and you get 5 and 7 as the values to the constructor, you can get it. So now I am calling n1.add. So n1.add as a method and n2.add as a method. Now the first integer is n1.getX1. So what is the value of x1 here? It is 5. So what will happen? GetX1 is a method. So where do we have getX1 method? So return x1. So whatever may be the value that you are giving over here, it is return it, and we get the value as 5. And here the second is n1.getX2 is 7. So you can see here that we are using the value as 7. Now n1.getSum. So getSum is doing what here? GetSum to return the sum. So when it is returning the sum, it will directly take the values as x1 as 5 and 7 and get the return sum of the values. So you get the answer, and you are calling the add method over here. So you are calling the add method here with the object reference with 5 and 7, and it gets it. So the sum will be 12. And the next one, again, we are having two other values, 10 and 5. So we get n2 as a reference and get x1, and n2 dot get x2. It will take the value as 5, 10 and 5. So this is 10 and 5. And n2 dot add, the method will be called is add. And when you go to the add method here, it is sum is equal to n1 plus n2. Here it is n1 plus n2 is 10 plus 5. Then 10 plus 5 is 15. And get the sum, return 15. So the answer is directly over here. We get those three different values. So this is how a constructor get value will be used. And you will be using some way to do the set values also. So this is another example for you to clearly understand as a student class. So here you are having different instance variables, student ID, name, mark, private, mark 2, mark 3, and total marks. So we are making it as accessible for all, and this you will be using set values to make the variables as private. Then we will be having the instance variables as constructors, operations, and set the marks, calculate the marks, and get the total. Excuse me. So you can see here that we have a class called as student. And as you see here, we have public student ID and public student name as a string. And then we are having the private variables as data type is double, mark 1, mark 2, mark 3, and total. And now if you see, we are having a constructor here. The name of the constructor is same as the class name. And we are having two parameters, integer ID and string name. So string ID and string name, we are creating a constructor for that. So student ID is equal to the ID that what we will be writing as an runtime, and student name is equal to what we will be writing it as and when the methods are being called. So this is the start of a constructor and end of a constructor. Now you need methods. So to set the marks. So you see here we are having set the marks. There are three values that we will write, mark 1, mark 2, mark 3. So this one is M1, M2, M2 and the runtime. So mark 1 is equal to M1, mark 2, M2 and mark 3, M3. And then we want a total mark method. So which is total is equal to mark 1 plus mark 2 plus mark 3. So we will call, so there is no return type here. You can do that return type also. But here we want the total to be printed when the method is called, as well as we want the get total. This is the return total now. So this one will return the total that we are going to get over here. So later on, when you create the slides, you can see that you are having student 1 and student 2. Now you can go to the main method, student st1 is equal to the ID number and the name, the ID number and the name. Now I want to set the marks for student reference, set 1, 30, 20, and 35. Set the marks because you know mark 1, mark 2, mark 3, and then also we are having set marks 10, 10, 15. So here you can see here that we are having set marks. So this is set method. So set, and this is the get method. So set and get. So now we are setting the marks here for for 2 students with three subjects. And now I call the total mark and I call the total mark for ST1 and ST2. So the program will go with these values to this particular place. So we are setting it over here, and the total will be written over here, and then you get the total. So here you are using the same reference for getting ST1 and ST2 as the total mark. And here you are running the method, calling the method with those values, and you are setting that here. So it depends upon the different objects that you create. Say, for example, I can create another one. Student ST3 is equal to, excuse me, new of the student. This is equal to new of student. Maybe you can write any other student ID number, say 1, 2, 3, 4, and then this is a student number, and then you are writing his string name as then Ellen. So we are writing the name as an Ellen. So now this is an ST3 is created, and here you are writing student ST3 is equal to new of student, right? So new of student, and then you write here ST3 dot set marks, and you are calling the set method set marks, and then you have to call the method with 3 different values. So maybe, for example, 30, 15, and 20. So now you want to call the total method. If you are just setting it over here, and then you can write here st3 dot total mark, the method that you want to call. And here you write one more statement like system dot out dot println total mark for student 3 is st dot get total. So here you set the total, and then you can do it. So as many students that you are writing, you can use it. And later on, this is like repeating the same objects with the same name. So we will be having something which is called as arrays, and from that you have array list. So we will use that one in our coming classes. So similarly, we are having one more example where you want to write a class for a bank name, and here you are making the ID, the string. So you are making a blueprint, and then you are creating a constructor with number, then balance, and for, sorry, this is string name, and this is the balance. So this ID is equal to number, name is equal to this, and so this is the constructor, end of the constructor, and you are having a method called as deposit. So you will be using the deposit method. Now here you can see the program attributes, name, balance, and then also you are having an operations, withdraw and deposit. So when you withdraw, the money has to be taken away from the balance, and deposit means you can add money to the balance. So we will write those methods. So the ID and name are public, and balance is private because it is locally to be accessed by the class. So you will be writing it as a private, and the other things are private. So now you have to make a constructor with this, and the ID of the Ahmed, and this is the balance. Now you can add customer, first customer with the new balance as the second customer with these ones. Add to the first customer 3000, and to the second customer you can add it, because whenever he is making deposit, so the new deposit will be equal to the balance that you are having, and you are adding the amount. And for the next method you have, which is called as withdraw. So the first customer is withdrawing 2000, so his 2000 will be reduced, and then you are having 1000 to that. And at the last you have to print out the name and the balance that they have. So this is a constructor that you are using, and continue with that. As you say that this is only the deposit, and now we want to write the method for withdraw. So now withdraw. So from withdraw, the current amount, right? So you can see that we are having the current amount is updated. So based on the new balance that you are having, so that's where if amount is less than the balance, balance is equal to the new balance minus the amount. So now at that case, get balance. So here you are having withdraw method, and here you are having the deposit method to deposit the values. Now go and call the main method, where you are creating an instance reference for those objects, and this is the balance that they have in the initial. Now customer 1 is deposited 3000, customer 2 is deposited 550. So this is customer 1, and this is customer 2. Now, for example, customer 1 is withdrawing 2000, and customer 2 is withdrawing 1000. So those methods will work in the one by one format. Now, if customer 1 dot get balance is greater than customer get to balance, customer ID and the customer name, and then we are having else customer ID plus customer name, that you can directly get the values as who is having the biggest balance. So that's how you do that. So similarly, another example is also there for a car. You can look in the program how a car is defined, how the variables are defined for a class, and how you are making the constructors. So you are having here two constructors. One is constructor with the two parameters, and here a constructor with the three parameters. And when you call in the main program, it will call the values that you are having. And we have a method called as calculate age, and we are also having a method for setting the value. So you can follow the slides to see into the program how the classes is defined and how the programs are called, and you can see how the objects are created. When you are having two Toyota 1999 as the two arguments, so this constructor will be called. And when you are having in this case, you are creating an instance reference with the three arguments, and then the constructor will be calling is for the three arguments that you are having. And whenever you are calling the method, you call with the object reference. Say, for example, you are calling the reference with C1 and C2, whatever the C1, C2 that you are calling, so the appropriate method will be called. And here you want to find out which car is the modern car. So based on the type of year that you are having here, it will tell you which car is having what year. So here you have 1999 according to this one. So this is the string, the car name, and the year. So here also you are having the year, the name, and the string values. So the owner of the car. So you can check the values which is higher based on the year of the year of the car, and it will tell you which car is oldest. Okay. So having said that, this what we are looking about is the different concepts of object-oriented programming, and we are hiding some information from each other, from one class to other class. So that is where information hiding is a practice of separating how to use a class from the details of its implementation. So we don't want the things to be commonly accessible for all. We can make it hide the information from one another. So that's where we call this one as an abstraction. So we use the word abstraction or information hiding. So it is another term used to express the concept of discarding details in order to avoid information overload. So we don't want to use that information to be passed on to the other classes. So we are hiding information from one class to the one object to the other object by defining it. So there is another concept which is encapsulation, which we will be discussing more about this in our week number 11. So encapsulation means the data and the methods of a class are combined into a single unit. So what we are doing here, we are creating a blueprint, right? So that blueprint is nothing but it's like a single unit. That's where you will define the data and the methods combined as a class object. So which hides the implementation details. Knowing the details is unnecessary because interaction with the objects occur via well-defined and simple interface. So it is that the interface need to be well organized. And in Java, hiding data is done by marking them as private. So you are having access modifiers, private, public, and protected, which we will be looking into it. So, but for now, so you are having public, it is accessible by all of them. Private is only accessible by the reference that you are going to create for the objects. Yeah. So private is an access modifier. Variables or methods can be declared with the access modifier private, like previously you saw. This is what we call it as data hiding, or we want to hide the information and information hiding. So it is preventing unintentional access. So this one, we do it to see that they are not accessible in your program. Sometimes the variables and the modifiers need to be accessed outside it or not to be accessed. So we protect it. So for example, customers, bank balance, you don't want the other people to have a look into it, only for the people or the program that you have defined where they can be used. You can protect it by using the private specifiers. Even compute interest and interest rate, all these modifiers can be used to protect it. Now, if you remember when I talked about the methods, I told you can do with the constructor or you can do with the accessor or mutator methods. So what are these accessor methods that previously you saw? We use something which is called as get method and set methods. So those are what we call it as accessor and mutator methods. So accessor methods allow programmer to obtain the value of an object instance value. So here you can say that obtain or get. So obtain is nothing but in the other name, it is get. So the data can be accessed but not changed. So you don't have option to do it changing, but you can get the data and with the modifier which we are using as get. So the name of an access method typically starts with the word get. So get method we call it as. So mutator methods allow the programmer to change the value. So here you are changing the value in a control order. So incoming data is typically tested and or you can filter it out. So the name of the mutator methods typically start with the word as set. So mutators are set methods and accessors are the get methods. So let's see this set and get methods. We will have a look into the example. So a get is a method by which you retrieve the value, you get the value. So these are called as getters. The name of the getter always starts with the word get method, and followed by the name of the attribute with a capital letter. So that is naming convention, how you can write it. So get, so you see the name of the start method, and then you are having an attribute ID, get name, get year, get department. So you can do that with constructor, which will be a default value, but sometimes you want to call it based on the object that you are creating as a reference. So that way you want to call directly ID, get name. Everyone has a different ID. So you want to call it with every individual object reference. So you use this get method. So similarly, we have set methods which are called as setters, which are used for retrieving the value of an attribute, the same like get, and this is with the set. The name of the setter always starts with set and followed by the name of the attribute with the capital letter. So you can see here set ID, set name, set year, and set department. So these are all what we call it as set. So you can set it and you can get it. So say for example here, the get method, as I mentioned to you, you are writing it as a method. Get ID, if you are writing the ID as a variable that you are using in your class, so you write it as get method and you write it as return. So this method has an integer as a return type. So here the return type is there and you are returning the value. So the return value in this case is the value of the attribute student ID. So the value will be returning is the student ID. Now, similarly, set. When you are setting the value, you will be having the parameters here because you will create based on the reference. Like for example, you are referring S1 dot as a student object, then you can say here S1 dot set ID, and then you whatever the ID that you want to create with, you can say 1, 2, 3, 4. This is integer type, so you will get this. So when you call this 1, 2, 3, 4 is what we are having as an I value, and which is 1, 2, 3, 4. That one will be giving it directly to the class variable that we have created, student, sorry. This one is student ID. So this one will directly give the student ID value that you have set here. So you are setting here, and this method has an integer as an argument and no return value in this case. So because you are only setting it, you are not returning it. So here set method, you are having the void, but in the get method, you are having the return type as based on the return type that you are using. Okay, so in this case, a constructor is a method that is used to construct an object. I already explained to you. A constructor always has the same name as a class name. So in this case, we were using the student as a constructor and we derived the values. And we saw that a constructor has no arguments. Through the arguments, you will give the attributes value other than the default value. So we want to use default values in the constructor, but sometimes, many a times, not sometimes, we will be using different values. So for that, you can see here that we are creating a constructor. Now we have a class student, ID, name, year, department, and now I am creating a constructor with the student and all those arguments that you will be parameters that I will use it. So student ID, name, department. So this department is equal to this. So when I create a reference, new of student, so for the first student, it will get the ID as 26, name as Noor, and the year as 3, and the department as CS. So we have 4 different arguments based on the type of call that you are making. So similarly, with the same, we are having 2 students, student 1 and student 2, which is new and which is of new. So you are having 4 arguments in the class here. So you are creating a constructor. This is a constructor and you are calling the constructor here. So whenever you call the constructor with the values, so automatically the program will get the default values that you have called when you are creating the constructor and calling them. So in the first case, student 1 will have all these things, and in this, student 2 will have all these things. So how do you make the complete one with the not only with the constructors, we want use the get method and set method. So here you are having the private variables as name, number, ID, and student department, string student department. So all these attributes I made it as private. So now you can have a constructor. This is the four things that you are having. ID, this ID is equal to ID, name is equal to name, and this is a constructor, same name as the class name. And now I write the methods for getting the attributes and set values for this one. So for integer, I am using get ID, so return ID. For the name, I am using string, get name and return, integer, get year, return, and get department, we are returning the department. So what we saw about in the previous thing, we saw that all this will be having a get method, get. So whatever all those get methods that you are having here, those get methods will get the return type, what you are talking about, return type that you are going to use. So what is the access modifier now? This is the important topic for Java programming languages, because sometimes you have to protect the methods and the classes from being accessed outside. So access modifier specifies accessible to changing variables and methods. There are 4 access modifiers in Java. Public, you already know that it is allows access from everyone or everywhere. Private allows access only from inside the same class as the modifier. So this is inside. And you are having, which is a protected one, allows access only from inside the same class. So this is inside the same class from a subclass or other classes of the same package. So if you're talking about a package, a group of class together is a package. So if you are having that only inside of the same classes, from a subclass, you can access this with the word protector. And you have default allows access from only inside the same class or from other class of the same package or the modifier. So remember that default is, it doesn't specify, and generally it is written as a blank. So it will allow only inside the same classes. So the modifier public means that there are no restrictions. Private means the instance variables can be accessed by the name outside of the class. So if you are having private, you can access it, cannot be accessed it. If you are having public, it can be accessed anywhere. But if you are having private, cannot be accessed by the name outside of the class. It is considered a good programming practice to make all instance variables private, because you have to get it all in the locally by the class itself. Most methods are public and thus provide controlled access to the objects. So generally, most of the methods that you define, they are defined as public. Usually methods are private only if used as helping methods or other methods in the class. So if you want to write as a helping method, then you make them as private. So you can see here, how do you make a method as a public integer. So you are having public class and you are having one more integer. So this is declared as public. So you are having public access, and access is not specified here. So you are not having any access specified here. Now I am having a method public integer add mile. So I am having integer a and integer b, and then we are having return a plus b. So we have integer here. This one will do that. And in a class, public class jogging, you write some code here and you get it over here. So public. So how do you declare a variable as a public, a method as a public, and a class as a public? So objects as parameters. So as you saw that how you can do the parameters also, you are having a method public integer. Then you can call those with parameters. So parameters types are types of parameters that can be accessed to a method. So that can include integer, character that you have. So here you can see that we are having integer method. So integer, double, string, and here you are calling this one with a my class name directly and an object of the class. So you can create the class reference for that and access it over here. So see the example here, public integer promotion, and you are calling directly as a class as an object reference E. So now you are using the class here and you are using the object of the class. So integer time employed, how much is the time employed. So the object will get e dot get employed. So do the calculation and it will return the rating. So an employer has an opening for a promotion for one of his employees. So the program is only for the employees who wants a promotion. He wishes to create a method that will take an employee as parameters. So it will take employee as a parameter and return the employee's rating based on their qualification for the new position. So here, based on the time, how much he's in the office, he will get the promotion. So you take the employee as an object, as a reference of a class, and then you can get those things done. So passing objects as parameters. Passing objects as parameters allow for much easier access to the information. So that's how will be much easier to pass on the parameters. It also permits making changes to objects inside the method and even allows for comparing two objects that cannot use primitive comparative method. So you can use it for only one place and you can get it the return type what it is having. So here, when you are saying for only one employee, that's fine. But here what we are doing, we are using different employees, employee A and employee B. You want to see who is having more number of years. So it can be used as a constructor here, public employee, and a method here is a promotion that we want to make as an object. So writing a method that returns an object is very similar to writing a method that returns a primitive type. So here the return type is employee. So we are using employee as a return type and calling the method as promotion. So here you are having a reference. So that is where we are returning A and B. So the methods can be used in that way to return the type. So variable arguments methods. So you have variable argument methods. A variable argument method is a method written to handle a variable number of arguments. Only works if you call the method with the same type of arguments as the method required. So see here, for example, here we are having the return type as integer, and here we are taking the numbers. So we want to write a method, integer sum is equal to 0, for I is equal to 0 up to the length of the array, then I plus plus, sum plus is equal to num of I, and then return. So this one is directly returning the sum of the value. So you take the total, you get the numbers up to the total length, take every number by array element and return it over here. So similarly, if you want to use it for employees also, in an employee organization, you may be having many employees. So you don't know what is the length of the employees. So for the first candidate, you will take starting from the employee of 0 up to the employee dot length is whatever may be the array length that you are having, and you check every employee with the ratings, and whoever is the best candidate, you will make that candidate as the best candidate, and whatever may be the number of array element that it is taking as the best element, and then it will return the best candidate from the array. So that's how the employees can be compared from the employees class, and you take every employee, and you previously saw the method, how the method will be calling the return type. So even you want to check for 3 different people, you can use it. Even if you want to do it for 2 people, you can do it, because it depends upon the array size, as we said, that how much time you are calling it at. So calling a method with array argument is like calling any other method. However, it can be called with different number of arguments each time it is called. So you can call with different values. So overall, what we have just now saw from the previous time, you are having a class, you are making the variables as private, you are having a constructor, this is without any arguments, and then we are having a set method, and this is a set miles per gallon, you are having the get method and get. So you are making the mutators and set methods, and mutate access modifiers are also there, which you can use to make a template overall for a class. And then you create an instance of a class, previously discussed already, public class vehicle tester, static void main string args, and then you are creating an class reference vehicle my car is equal to new of vehicle. So in the vehicle class, all the things will be called, that whatever you have declared here, all these things will be applicable if you are using that class over here. So inherit all the attributes and methods defined in the class template, interact independently from one another. So the objects that you create, my car 1, my car 2, you can use it, or reference objects are created using the new operator. So you can see here that we are creating it the new operator. And this is just like a revision that we have taken four main parts of a method. So you are having public, return type, method, and parameters. So this is a get method, return type, name of the method, and parameters, and you will get these as defining the methods. So what are the class methods? Already discussed. Every class will have a set of methods which allow you for accessor methods, which are called as getters, and which are mutator methods, which are called as set methods. And then you are having the functional methods to return or perform some sort of functionality for all the classes. So the methods that you make are all the different methods. And accessor methods is what you are writing as private variables of the class. So here can access and return the value of a specific private variables of a class. So here you are having a return type string, and this is a get method, an integer type get balance per second, and you can have a return statement. Usually have no parameters, so you can see here that we are not having any parameters, but you can override them based on method overriding, which we will look into it. So mutator methods, so set, and here you are having the values that you are making the values to be set. This one is return type. So whatever the return type that we are setting it over here, you will get that one. And also, as we saw that we will be having the functional methods, which are not only the set and get, but we are considering vehicle1 and vehicle2 as objects references, like what you saw, and you want to see which one is having the type. Functional methods perform functionality for a class. So here, this is comparing the objects that you are comparing with the gallons, V2 as a get mileseconds, and return based on which is equal to, or which is less than, or which is greater than. And how we make the constructor, we already know how to make the constructor. This is the vehicle class, and then we are having a vehicle object, and we are new vehicle. So we are making new vehicle, and here you can make it with directly with the constructor, or you can set. So depending upon the set methods, so no need to make the values to be set over here. You can do it individually based on the reference objects, and you are calling the same reference of the object with the get method. So whatever you set over here, it will call with the same object reference that you are getting the output over here. So this reference you can use with an instance method or a constructor. This is the reference of the current object. So we are referencing here to the current object. So you can see here that reference to the current object is being called. Refer to any member of the current object by using this word, most commonly used when a field is shadowed by a method or constructor parameter of the same name. So for example, you can see here that when a method argument shadows a field of object, that this reference is used to differentiate the local scope for the class scope from the class scope. So here you are having a class called as point, and here you are having the variables private x and private y, and we are having a constructor point integer x and integer y. So here this dot x is equal to x and this dot y is equal to y. So you can use it, those variables, to define as this references of the current object, and you can use in the constructor as such. So there is a concept of garbage collection. Considering the code below, what will happen if memory after the line C2 is equal to C? So now here you see we are creating class C, card C and card C2 as a new card, diamonds, 4 aces, and this one is there. So when executed, C2 is equal to C. So C2 is equal to C, takes the reference C2 and makes it reference the same object as C. So whatever you are having here, so it will refer to the same object as here. This effectively renders the original object class 2 useless, and garbage collection takes care of it by removing it from the memory. So in Java, we have very good garbage collection option where unused objects references will be gone. So when it is defined, it is defined it like that. But when you are using it, C2 is equal to C1, so C2 will get the new values, but what will happen to these ones? So they will be garbage collected. And the last few things, we have a method which is called as finalizer, is a code called by the garbage collector when it determines no more reference to the object exists. So if you see this C2, you are getting the new value, but you are not using the new value that you have set. So in that case, what the Java will do is it will call a garbage collector method, which is called as inherit a finalize method, which is available from java.lang.object. So these methods take no arguments and is written to perform no action when called. So whenever you are having the finalize method is called, it allows you to modify what happens before garbage collections. So notifying the user about the garbage collections that it is about to occur. So when you have these finalized methods, we have option called as try and catch methods, which will try to close it. And finally, when you see that finalization has occurred, when you can write it, if you want specifically that the garbage collector should be known to the user that what happened to those objects, you can use these finalizer methods. Okay, so overloaded constructors, already I discussed about this. So you can have the same name as the class name, but here you will be having the different signature. So here you see we are calling with integer one time, and here we are calling with the integer string, and here we are calling with the different parameters. So the implementation will depend. Assign initial values to instant variables inside a class are declared like methods, so they are also like methods. Overloading construct. So the concept that we call here is overloading, where the method names will be same, but their parameters will be different. A constructor means having more than one constructor with the same name, but with different types and or the number of arguments that you are having here, the different arguments, and when you are calling with the methods. So how to use this overloaded constructor method? You can see here that as an example. Public class dog, you have weight, age, and bark, and you are having three different constructors here, which is one with no arguments, and the second one is with two arguments, and the third one is with three arguments. So depending upon the type of program you want to call, so weight, loudness, and bark, here you are calling with two, and here we are calling with three. So this is a constructor that specifies the dog, weight, loudness, and bark noise. So this is a constructor that specifies the dog, weight, and loudness in the arguments. So here it types, it depends. So when you are creating, you can use it to get the values. So Java reads the constructor based on what arguments are passed on to it. Once it identifies the constructor name, it will compare the arguments. When you call it, it will check which one is the constructor calling. If the argument types do not match the first constructor of that name, it will proceed to the second, third, and so on. So it will go in the main method in that way. If it does not find a match, then the program will not compile. So if you don't find it, it will not compile in the overall case. So this is how we can write the constructors as overloaded methods, and also you have methods to be overloaded. So what is methods to be overloaded? It's the same concept where you are having the method name is bark and bark over here. With the same method name, you can use it, but here your signature or the arguments will be different. So like overloading constructors, overloading a method occurs when type or the number of parameters differ. Even the type and the number of differs. So below is an example of a situation where a method would need to be overloaded. So here we are with overloading a method, but the first time is when you are calling dog is a driver class. So the dog is a driver class over here. So you can use both bark methods in the same class that you want to define. So that is method overloading. So with that, we complete our first part of constructors, finalizers, methods, mutators, and all those things. So in our next class, we will discuss more about object-oriented programming, class and objects, class number 2 in our next session. With that, thank you and happy learning.